I've been looking forward to addressing this question in our God Question series, where we are taking the top 5 questions that folks outside the faith, your friends who may not share your faith, these are the biggest sort of defeaters or the biggest things that they would say is their biggest reason why they don't believe, and we're just kind of addressing them. I want to start out with a story from Francis Collins, who used to be the head of the National Institute of Health, who headed up the national or the International Genome Project. I'm messing up the terminology there. Anyway, smart guy, and he wrote a book called Faith and Science. He opened up his book with this simple little story of when he went to the zoo. He took his family to the zoo, and they found themselves, shortly after they got there, in the reptile section of the zoo. And he was really happy to see that once they got themselves into the reptile section, they found that one of the zookeepers had a python that she was holding and was offering the visitors the opportunity to hold the python. And as she was holding the python and kind of like offering it to people, and people were treating it like she was offering an appetizer of crushed glass, people were like, but there's a couple of teenage boys who are like, hey, which one's going to be the tough one who's going to be able to step up and hold the snake? And this whole thing was just kind of going on slow motion. And while this whole thing happened, Dr. Collins' little 2-year-old daughter walks right up to the zookeeper and says, "Can I pet the snake, please?" And he was so proud of her because she wasn't afraid of the snake. She just said, "Wow, that thing's amazing." She's not seen snakes on a plane or any other scary snake movies. She doesn't have all these weird ideas about what snakes will do to you if you touch them. She just saw that thing's amazing. And she went right up to it. And for Dr. Collins, and I think for me, it's a great metaphor for how people of faith and people of science often relate to one another. There's an amazing, wonderful world out there, but because people of science and people of faith have been filled with all these ideas of each other, they're afraid to touch it. They look at it, and maybe they might touch it, but they have all these crazy ideas, and people of faith unnecessarily miss out on the wonders of this world. And oftentimes people of science miss out on the wonders of the Christian faith, not because of facts, but most of all because of fear. All right? We're going to be teaching through the passage Psalm 19. And if you remember what was read, the psalm talks about creation and it talks about Scripture. It brings both of these two worlds together. The first point on this, I'll back up. All disclaimers. I don't really know much about science at all, actually. My degrees are in business, theology, and missiological leadership, which is just call a little bit of anthropology, a little bit of leadership, a little bit of whatever, right? So I have no degrees in science. In fact, I got out of high school without even taking physics. I don't know how I did it. I think they were just done with me. They're like, get out of here. All right, so I don't know how I got all that. That being said, I love science. I love science. I love zoos. I love museums. I love all of it. And that's point number one. Point number one, if we're going to take Psalms 19 seriously, is that you should love science. Everybody should just love science. Why? Because the heavens declare the glory of God. The heavens declare the beauties and the wonders of God. It says day after day they pour forth speech. It's like the world, the creation is constantly talking to us. They have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words the end of the earth. All the things that God has created, He's created to reveal Himself to us, to communicate to us. My oldest child is an artist. And when I see the art, I understand my child in new ways. Why? Because art reveals the artist. And if God created the entire world, and this is the position that a Christian holds to, that means everything that has been created, everything you see, everything that's been created from things that have been created, like buildings like this, iPads, all these things that have been created and sub-created, all of them reveal God and His beauty and His wonder and His order. We don't have to be afraid of it. We should look to discover it as much as possible. Why do people like Taylor Swift so much? Because she's an artist. And if you listen to her music, what happens? You feel closer to her, right? And if you're like a true Swiftie, it's like you've broken up with 18 boys because you've done that vicariously through her, right? Because you feel close to her. When we look at the creation, we are supposed to be drawn closer to see and experience and appreciate God for who He is. I actually think that the decline of this leads to so much boredom. I think when I look at our world, I think I see a very bored world. Taylor Swift is great, but like the most amazing thing that happened on TV in the last month is that Taylor Swift went to a football game. Right? The top-rated show on a Sunday evening since the Super Bowl was when Taylor Swift went to watch the New York Jets play football. Come on, we have a bored world. One of my favorite quotes from the 90s is when Wayne Campbell from Wayne's World said, "I once thought I had mono for an entire year. Turns out I was just really, really bored." Maybe some of the problems that our world has experienced is just sheer boredom. And the psalmist says, "The heavens and the earth declare glory." There is glory for us. There is wonder for us. We should love science. We should love it. We should explore it. We should see it. We should see the order of the universe, the mechanics of a two-seam fastball, the beauty of a sunflower, the history and the wonder of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. We should love it. We should explore it. We should see it and let it fill us with wonder. There really is no reason to be bored. And science and all that God has created gives us all of this to us. I find a lot of people afraid of science, though. People are afraid of it. But if you are a Christian, here's something you just need to know. If God is who He says He is, if God made all of things in this world, there's nothing that's ever going to be discovered in science that's going to disprove Him, right? All true truth is God's truth, right? Sometimes a discovery might not fit with what we know or feel is true about the world. But remember, we don't know everything. And discoveries get reinterpreted later when other things are learned. And yes, there will always be atheists who are going to try and grab some piece of science to prove a point, right? But just because atheists disagree with us, and just because they want to make a point or prove a point, of course they're going to grab something and drive an angle. It doesn't mean they're right. And it certainly doesn't mean we need to be afraid of the means to which they grab their point. If God is who He says He is, the truth is always our friend. If God is who He says He is, the truth in everything we learn in science will always be our friend. We never need to feel threatened or fearful of anything that science will ever discover. Why? Because the heavens declare the glory of God. Everything that has been created is here to reveal God to us in a different kind of way. And therefore, we need not be bored and we need not be fearful, right? But the opposite, no. We should love science. A lot of people think the opposite of love is hate. It's actually not. The opposite of love is fear. Hate derives itself from fear. And for those who love science, the scriptures give us an opportunity to love God's word. This Psalm 19 not only says the heavens declare the glory of God, it also says the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. To trust the God of this world, we know that he reveals himself through 2 books. Creation is the big book that reveals the artistry of God, right? But we might misunderstand what the artistry of God might say, right? I remember going to the Brandywine Museum and seeing all the different art from the Wyeths. I thought it was pretty cool. But then I got a tour from somebody who knew the Wyeths. And she told me the stories around the different pieces of art. She enabled me to interpret the art for what it is. Scriptures is the little book. It's the decoder ring. It gives us an interpretation of all we see and all we experience. If I was to just draw a piece of art and say, help figure this thing out, you might see it and you may think it looks amazing, but when the artist comes and tells you what it means, then you can appreciate it for what it really is. That's what the scriptures do. It says, okay, this is what it means. This is the why behind it. But for those in science, and I'll tell you this, if maybe science is a new thing to you or you don't think much about it, when I talk to scientists and those in the scientific community, their biggest beef in faith is what they would say to me is like, I'm open to believing in Christianity, but I don't understand why you're going to make me believe in a young earth. And I'm going to get a little granular on this one particular issue. There are folks out there who are for whatever reason, have decided that the only way to interpret the Bible when it comes to the creation of the world is to say that the Bible teaches that there's a very, very young earth. And that might be possible. That the world is only about 6,000 years old, and God made Adam and Eve to be appear. He didn't make them as babies; he made them mature and with age. So maybe God made the world with age, and for fun, we'll throw some dinosaurs and a bazillion other animals into the ground as dead and make the world look old. And God may have done that. I wasn't there. And maybe he used the flood to mix the whole thing up, right? I wasn't there. But that's not necessarily what the scriptures teach. Maybe 7 days or 7 days in God's mind, 7 eons. Who knows what those things are? But what science would say about the creation of the world doesn't line up with Genesis 1. There's a range of orthodox teaching regarding evolution and creation in Genesis chapter 1. There's certainly macroevolution that just says it all developed without God at all. We wouldn't believe that. But there are smart people, people who deeply believe the Bible who would teach an intelligent design, even a theistic evolution. There's a range of beliefs. Remember, none of us were there. We don't know. Everybody is guessing, trying to make an intelligent guess. Everybody is working off of a theory. Every idea about how God created this world is theory and faith. Everything is built that way. So the fundamental place where Christians trip up on this is the way they interpret Genesis 1. And I understand where they're coming from. They're like, Genesis 1 seems like God did this and on this day, this day, this day, this day, this day. It seems like history, but every biblical scholar that takes it seriously will point out to you that Genesis 1 is art. It's poetry. It may very well have been a song. Why? Because, well, it repeats like songs, right? God saw that it was good. And then there was morning and there was evening this first day. There's song, there's development, there's meaning, there's a climax towards the end. All of these things happen in poetry. When you're telling history, you don't repeat yourself all the time, right? Now, from time to time, I like to, I'm a U2 fan, and so they have a song in one of their albums, and somewhere around 2014, called Cedarwood Road, that talked about the creation of the band U2. And I think it's a pretty good song, and I was going to let you watch a video clip of the concert because that was really good, but Lou told me that we'd get shut down online because there's stuff. Anyway, YouTube doesn't like stuff like that. Anyway, but it talked about how the band came together. It told the storyline of Bono meeting Edge on Cedarwood Road. It talked about all of Bono's jacked up family of origin issues, all of those things there. Now, I like the band so much that I went and read the book. I read the book and the storyline of how the band came together. And I just can't find any of those things from that song. Maybe the song is wrong. Maybe the song is untrue. Or maybe it's a song and not here to communicate the specifics of the history of how the band came together. Oh, it communicates some very, very clear things about how it was formed with friendship, how there's a deep connection to Dublin, how it's connected to how the songs, unpack a lot of Bono's junk, right? Those things are clearly there, but it is a song. It's not the history. This is the history. Cedarwood Road is the song. When we look at the scriptures, Genesis 1 is a song. Think powerful introduction, an artistic introduction to something that God wants to communicate. And there's some very, very important things that Genesis 1 does communicate. Probably one of the top 2 to 4 chapters in the entire Bible as far as theological knowledge. But if you want to get scientific history from a document that's somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 years old, you might get disappointed. To push my point just a little further, I'm also a Bruce Springsteen fan, and he's got his own song about how the band came together. It's called the 10th Avenue Freeze-Out, right? And let's just imagine a dweem within a dweem. I get to go backstage sometime, and I get to meet Bruce Springsteen. And I said, Bruce, 10th Avenue North, or 10th Avenue Freeze-Out, it's a pretty awesome song. It's kind of awesome. He's like, yeah, I kind of wrote it. It's like, and that's where you talk about how the band came together, right? He's like, yeah, that's it. I have a question for you. There's this point in time where you talk about the changes made uptown. That's Columbia Records, and the big man joined the band. That's Clarence Clemens, right? He's like, yep. I wrote the song. Yep, that's it. Okay. And then the song says, from the coastline to the cities, all the little girlies raised their hands. That must have been amazing. Like, I read in the book. I didn't find it in the book. Why isn't that not in the book? Right? Or was that Hands Across America? Okay, no, all right. But then the next thing is you talk about Steve Van Sant because you say, I'm going to sit right back easy and laugh when Scooter, little Steven, and the big man, Clarence Clemens, where Scooter and the big man bust the city in half with the 10th Avenue Freeze-Out. That must have been amazing. Was that like an earthquake? Was that like a civil war? But here's the deal. It wasn't in the book. Or was it prophecy? Is that going to happen? If I'm in backstage with Bruce Springsteen and I'm asking him those questions about his song, he's looking around and said, "Who let this guy in? Why is this guy in here?" It would be absurd. Why? Because he'd say, "It's a song. It's not history." Genesis 1 is artistry. Is it one of the most important chapters in all of the scriptures? Yes. Is it a scientific passage answering questions of the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th, and 20th centuries? No. If you want to learn about who God is, it says an awful lot about who God is. If you want to know who you are, it probably tells you more than any other chapter in all history about who you are. Do you want to find out how God created the world and the order of it? Well, it was not written to answer those questions. You know, what it was likely written to answer is all the other creation narratives at the time, whether it's the Babylonian or the Sumerian, every other creation, they talked about how the world was basically created from the gods or from the refuse of the gods. The gods had some sort of party and this was left over or whatever. Every other creation narrative talks about how we were created from something, some sort of mistake or some sort of war, battle, or whatever of the gods. Genesis 1 comes out, boom, God created out of nothing. And man and woman were created equal. And man and woman have dignity because we were made in the image of God and we are here to rule. It tells us very, very important things. And because of these important things and because that the only ancient history that talks about how God created this world orderly and with wonder and with beauty, you know what happens is real science comes only out of the Judeo-Christian faith. Why? Every other world view looks at this world as some sort of mistake of the gods and that humans aren't that meaningful. And you know what happens in those worlds? They don't treat people with meaning. And they don't treat the world as something good to be studied. Genesis 1 says tremendously important things, just doesn't answer certain questions. That point was the opposite of love is fear. If you're a scientist, we're not going to ask you to stop looking into what you're looking into. There's nothing that you're going to find that should ever contradict who God is from our perspective. It should only reveal God more and more. What happens, though, is because of the fear, we stop doing the things that you ought to be doing when you start dealing with knowledge and understanding. Faith, Christian faith, and science both require faith, reason, and humility. First of all, faith. The modern world that came from the Enlightenment, that when the Enlightenment happened with the discovery of the scientific method, right, 16th, 17th century stuff, they all said, look, it was so powerful, and they realized we could discover everything. Like we could discover everything. We can learn everything that needs to be known, and we can come up with a fundamental understanding of everything. And therefore, we'll never have to have faith ever. Why? Because we can get down to the bottom of what's really, really true. Why? Because so much science was growing, exploding, and there's this tremendous scientific optimism. And the general assumption is like, if we could do that, we can dispense with all this faith stuff. Oh, and all the authority that comes with it. And we could just learn everything and understand everything. And scientists would say to people who are believers, they're just like, we can't trust you because you take these faith leaps and you're reasoning a circle. You believe in the Bible, you believe in God because of the Bible, and you believe in the Bible because of God. And these faith circles, you have this circular faith, and we can't trust that. We believe in science, and we just believe we're going to start with the knowledge we have. But that in of itself is contradictory, right? Because all science is built upon faith, right? Because a lot of theories are never given for certainty. We work with theories. We build on faith in this theory. We build on faith in this theory. We build on faith in this theory. And the knowledge is constructed always with circular reasoning. So just like the Christian begins with faith, the scientist begins with faith. Carbon dating, we don't have certainty that that is exactly what it is, but we believe it. We trust it. Other tools we trust. Will we ever have certainty? No. Scientists and those who attach themselves to religion are always using faith. There's no way to get out of faith and reasoning. We need humility. The postmodern world, the postmodern thought has been really helpful because they've gone to all the scientists and all the overconfident people about their faith and their science and said, don't you guys realize you guys are all subjective? We all bring our bias to everything. The true hope of science is that we can have a university, we can have a diversity of knowledge in this thing, and then we can build a united understanding of all knowledge. But what ended up happening is that true science telescopes on an issue, right? And so what ended up happening is that the biologists started telescoping on this particular issue. And then within biology, they ended up telescoping on animals, and then it's like mammals, and then it's like dogs, and it's like certain kind of dogs. And everybody is looking so deeply into one thing that they may have a depth of knowledge there, but how do you bring everything all together, right? How do you bring all things together? Because if every scientist is looking deeply into one thing, will anybody ever have the wisdom to be able to look deeply into everything and have the scope to bring it all together? No scientist could do that. No theologian can do that. There's no such thing as a man-made university that brings all knowledge about everything together. When you talk to a true scientist, the more they know, the more questions they have. You talk to somebody who's a true theologian, the more they know the scriptures, the more questions they have. It needs to give us humility about what we truly and really can know. The downside of postmodernity is people who will say things like, I don't know if it's true for others, but it's true for me. And scientists, when they hear believers say things like that, they say, well, that doesn't really work. Because if it's true for you, it's true for you because it feels like it's true for you, but what's going to happen when you don't feel like it's true for you? If it's not true for everybody, it's just not true. And somebody can have they can have my truth, they can say it's my truth, right? When it comes to seeing an accident, right? If there's an accident out there and everybody might have their own different perspective of it, right? But there's also an objective truth that there was an accident. If somebody says, my truth says that there wasn't an accident, they're just wrong. There was an accident. If it's just your truth that Christianity is real and true, but you don't think it's true for others, you probably don't have a biblical faith. You have a good feeling about the faith. You like it. But it's either true or it's not. And if it's not true for everybody, it's not true for anybody. And that's just reasonable. Reason leads us to think with discipline about the things that are revealed to us, whether in the scriptures or through the creation. There's one other thing that I think reason leads everyone to have to consider, even just in the historical sciences. Reason forces, I think, everybody to ask the question for themselves, who is Jesus? And whether the scientist likes it or not, the worldview that gave birth to particularly Western science and enlightenment came through the person of Jesus. the sense of order, the hope to know, the understanding of a good world, of dignified people. If you appreciate things like social justice, love, mercy, the value of humility, the wonder of science, and even law, all of those things flow through the Judeo-Christian ethic, and particularly the person of Jesus. You take Jesus out of the mix, we might not come to scientific worldviews. We might not come to things that science bears. So he's the most compelling and powerful person in all of history. And it's unreasonable to just dismiss him. It's not good thinking to say, yeah, he was just made up. He wasn't. And even the most virulent opponent knows that he was a real person that lived and spoke and acted. And here's the thing, he claims to be God, and he claims the allegiance of all people. And not only does he claim the allegiance of all people, he claimed to be God. He said he was going to die and rise again, and he did it. Nobody else has done that before. Nobody has done that since. And then he claims kingship and rulership over all creation, and he demands the allegiance of all people. And not only that, for 2,000 years, people have been attesting to a personal experience of the resurrected Jesus in their hearts and souls. They speak to it. And it's not just certain kinds of people. It's not just like the poor people or the white people. Every single culture continues to have the same attestation. And you could use sociology, and you can use sociology to explain why the Mormons happen or other cults happen, but you can't do that to Christianity. Those cults, they boot off of nominal Christianity. Christianity continues to go from generation to generation, culture to culture, with the same experience that people experience the resurrected Jesus in your heart. It would be unreasonable to not take a look and ask the question, who is he? For me, I would look at the scriptures and I would say, could this all be made up by a bunch of people trying to make up a story? And I continue to struggle to kind of, as I resisted it, I wanted to say, people made this up. But the moment for me that changed things is when I realized that not only did the apostles proclaim the resurrection, but if they were proclaiming a resurrection that wasn't true, people do stuff like that, but they rarely die for it. It's rare for somebody to die saying something is true, right? But if they all knew that it was a lie, why would they have died for it? Why would they have died making up this story about Jesus' resurrection? To a person, over and over, countless and over 500 people saw the resurrected Christ. Many of them died saying that this was true and this was real. The question, and it's a true scientific question, it's a true question of reason, is asking the question, who is Jesus? And you need to know he calls for the allegiance, the loyalty, and the worship of all humanity. To disregard who he is would be utterly unreasonable and a failure of humility. You might have had this book that you read if you went to college, they asked you to read this book. It was called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. If you might not have heard the book, but you've heard of what he taught. One of the things he taught is that science does not advance layer upon layer like putting paper on top of each other. Science, it actually advances through frustration. because there's a model of how people think things are, right? They think that it's this way. And as science continues to grow and expand, what ends up happening is the data continues to fail to fit into the model. And increasingly what ends up happening is more information is brought and it doesn't work inside the model. And all of a sudden, boom, somebody offers a different model that keeps all the data inside of it. And it fits, and all of a sudden, scientific research explodes. The classic example of this was the Ptolemaic universe, right? When people thought that everything in the universe revolved around the earth. And then along the way, people started saying, well, no, that's not how the data looks. It looks more like the earth revolves around the sun, and other things like that. And people were freaked out about that. They were afraid of the science. They said, no, that can't be it. And in particular, the institutional church says, no, clearly you'd be a heretic to say something like that. People were afraid of that. But along the way, when the moment was right, Copernicus showed up and talked about a heliocentric world where the world revolves around the sun. And the moment was right, and yes, the religious people got afraid, and they called him a heretic. But the entire world said, yes, it's right, it's true, it fits the paradigm, and all of a sudden, everybody got it, and science exploded once they allowed that which was true to speak up. And it didn't ruin everything like the people who were afraid of it did. It made everything better. Thomas Kuhn talks about that as a paradigm shift. That's often what happens when it comes to people's faith. Maybe in your life, things aren't working. You got a model of how you think your life should be going, or how life should be, that should be this way or that way, and the data is just not fitting in, and you're finding more and more frustration. You're getting frustrated with how life is treating you. You're getting frustrated as to how things are working. That's how I came to faith. All the things I was seeing wasn't fitting together. When I started reading the words of Jesus, all of a sudden I started seeing things through a different kind of paradigm. When I released myself from needing life to look like this, and I accepted a life and a worldview that Jesus offered, boom, everything got easier, and a lot of things got freer. And ever since then, my Christian life has followed the paradigm shifts of demanding the world be this way and wanting things to be this way and accepting the world as God has offered it to me and finding that things get easier and things move forward. Faith and science actually have an awful lot in common. We don't need to be afraid of any of it. All truth is God's truth. And the truth, and when it's true, is always our friend. Let's pray.